Am I live? Okay. Okay, there we go. Hey there, Taylor Ellwood here, and welcome to the Indie Author live stream. So, tonight I am talking about how to manage the finances of self publishing from the profit perspective. In the previous two videos, I discussed kind of did like a broad overview, and then I discussed the expenses side. I'm going to briefly recap the expenses side because it plays a role in your profit. So, expenses are basically anything that is business related that costs you, that basically is a cost for your business, right? And on the profit side of it, it's basically any money that's left over after those expenses have been taken out. Now, if you're watching this video and you're not a subscriber, click the subscribe button below and then click on the little bell notification. All right, so let's continue on here. So, let's, for the sake of argument here for self publishing, let's just go with a monthly model to this. Each month, you have expenses that come out. Those expenses are things that include your book cover and your editing and the layout and design. And they include your marketing, and they include such as your online advertising, your website, your newsletter, promo specials, things like that. Now, as I discussed last time, some of those costs can be cut. If you're clever enough, like if you know how to do cover art and design and you know how to do layout, then great, you can cut those expenses right out. Of course, you have to factor in that you're paying in time instead. So, I mean, that's something to remember. But again, you can cut some of those, but some of those expenses are things that aren't going to be cut no matter what you do. For example, you should never cut out the expense of an editor. If you're fortunate and your partner's a really good editor, then have your partner edit your books and you work out some kind of arrangement with them. But in general, let's just assume you're paying for editing. Now, your other expenses, once all those are factored out, whatever you have left at the end of the month is basically your profit. Now, your profit is the money that you have left over that you have not spent on your business. Yes, we've got profit. Now, at this point, you might be thinking to yourself, well, hey, I got profit. I can do whatever I want with it. Not so fast there, my self-publishing friend. Not so fast. Okay, look. When you self-publish a book and you have some profit left over, that is worth celebrating, but you don't want to just spend it willy-nilly. You have to think it through because you have tax ramifications to think about. I know you don't want to hear that word tax, but you know what? It is the season, right? And here's the deal: when you're a self-publisher, or even if you've traditionally published your writing, you're getting paid in royalties. You are essentially in business for yourself at that point. Now, the thing that you want to keep in mind is that when you get those profits can go to a few different things. But one of the things that you should be doing is you should be saving some of those profits, putting them into a business savings account, and possibly into a business retirement account if you can. Again, check with your financial advisor and your tax consultant on that stuff. Don't take my word for it. But here's why you want to put some of that money aside. Because you will have to pay taxes. Now, depending on how much money you're making, maybe you'll only be paying a small amount of taxes. Like if you're making below 50K or 60K, I would say you probably only need to file your taxes once a year. But again, check with your accountant on that one. But then you have to factor in that, okay, what are they looking at when they determine taxes for you? Well, they're looking at the gross amount of income, not the net. Your net is your profit. Now, the IRS or whatever your tax entity is, depending on what country you are in, when you're watching this, they will factor in the expenses to some degree. I mean, you can write off some of your expenses, or you can write a percentage off of your expenses. For example, in the U.S., you currently can write off 50% of a meal if it's been done for a business purpose. So like you might be able to write off your book covers and your online advertising and things like that. But even so, you're still going to have to factor some of that in. And then you also have to factor in your profits. So you should always be putting some money aside in your business savings to factor that in, because if you need to pay taxes, you want to have the money up front and ready to go, if possible. And this is why I always put some money aside each month, because I'm factoring in that I'm going to have to pay taxes at some point for my business, and I want to just take care of it and make it as painless and easy as possible for myself. The other reason why you want to be putting some money aside, though, is for liquid capital. And what do I mean by that? Well, liquid capital is a nice thing to have when you want to engage in a project, that's business related. For example, let's say that you decide that you want to make your books into audiobooks. Well, I mean, depending on what you do, you're probably going to be paying a fee for that work. I mean, you can go down the route where you share the royalty. Um, like on ACX, for example, they'll do a thing where you can split the 40% royalty halfway, so 20% to one person and 20% to the other. The issue with that then is that that person is always getting 20% of your royalties, half of them basically. Whereas if you pay them up front, you have that initial cost, but then you basically get the royalties for the rest of your life, and you'll make money on those royalties as long as your audiobooks sell. So having some liquid capital is nice, because then you can pay those fees up front. For example, for when I first started out with the audiobook stuff, I did the half royalties thing. And I did that for a number of my books, and it was a good thing to do, because that was a way for me to build some capital up with my audiobooks. But once I got to a point where I was making enough money to cover some of that and put it aside, I started paying for it up front. And that was nice, because then now I'm seeing more money with my audiobook sales. So you want to be thinking from a monetary, a money mind, a money strategy perspective with everything that you do with your self-publishing. And I'm sharing that with you because I think it's really worthwhile to consider. In fact, we're going to talk about that more in the next video when I do it. Don't worry, I'm not ending now, so don't go anywhere for the one person who's watching this right now. And thank you for watching. So what you want to keep in mind is you want to have some liquid capital. The other thing you want to keep in mind is, let's say you do decide that you want to retire someday, or that you want to put some money toward retirement. Again, you're going to want to talk to your financial advisor and or tax consultant on this, but you may be able to put some of that money aside that you're making profit wise tax free. And if you can, that's a good thing to do, because then that allows you to save more of that money. And really, I'm just going to be brutally honest here. The name of the game here, in terms of being in business, in my mind, is that you pay as little taxes as possible. That might just sound horrible, but the fact of the matter is, you're always dealing with expenses, and you're getting taxed. You're getting taxed twice anyway. Again, you can verify that with your accountant. But basically, if you look at it like Social Security tax, you're paying the employer and employee side of the Social Security tax. So that's not fun. All that aside, when you have profits, you might also think, well, hey, I can take some of that money for myself. And you can. But keep in mind, again, that you're going to have to pay taxes on that. If it's only a small amount of money that you're pulling out each month, that's okay. But you want to keep that in mind. You are going to have to pay taxes on that, because you're pulling it aside for personal use, which means that you're paying for that Social Security, for example, and the Medicare and all that other fun stuff. Whereas if you keep your profit in the business, you're not paying for that, because it's in the business. It's not going towards you. I always recommend, with the profits, that you only pull aside what you need to pull aside to meet your expenses. And this is where it can actually be useful to consider getting a part-time job or a full-time job, because while you're growing your business, because then you can at least use that to meet your living expenses and just keep the money in your business while you continue to build it and grow it. And even after, when you get to the point where you could go full time, it could be worth considering keeping a part-time position where you just work part of the week for somebody else, and you basically use that money to meet the living expenses and draw on as little of the profit as possible. But again, you have to decide what your quality of life is and what you want to do. And if you have a partner that is in support of you and everything else, that may factor into what you do as well. The reason why I share all this in regards to the profits is because these are things that you need to be thinking about as a self-publishing writer. And I think a lot of times, a lot of self-publishers don't think about that. It's like, oh, I got to write more books, I got to market. Well, yeah, you do need to do all that, but you need money to do that, and you need to understand how the profits side of things works. If I'm making a profit, I want to make sure that I'm putting some of that money aside to cover the taxes. I want to put some of it aside to cover the liquid capital for projects that I want to work on, and for book covers and things like that. And I want to put some of it, and I may want to pull some of it aside for my personal use. But again, I got to factor that in. And as you make more money, the other thing that you want to be thinking about is whether or not you'll need to make quarterly tax payments. Again, this may not be a factor when you're making only like 40 or 50K a year on your writing, but as you get to the point where you're starting to make more money, it does become a factor. And you want to be thinking about that, because if you're making a fair chunk of change, then you want to be paying you want to be doing quarterly tax payments. And again, check with your accountant. I know I say that a lot, but the reason why I say that is because I'm not an accountant, and I'm giving you some financial advice, but you should trust but verify. Always double check anything that someone tells you, because at the end of the day, you're the one who has to deal with the ramifications of that, not me. And really, I'm telling you what I would do anyway, and what I do. I always verify anything I do with my accountant, because and with my financial advisor, because it's covering your butt, and you want to be thinking about that. So with your profits, you have some important decisions to make. And what's really important is that you recognize that, yes, it's great to make money, but it's also really important to know what to do with that money and how to use it wisely. You want to be thinking from that money strategic perspective. What can I be doing to make more money off of this? How can I take this profit and leverage it in a way that's going to help me bring in even more? For example, being able to pay for your audiobook expenses instead of having to share a royalty. Yeah, there's that initial cost, but the long-term gain is you actually make more money in the end, as long as your audiobooks are selling. And of course, that's the key thing that you have to remember. So, those are things to keep in mind as you are doing this kind of work. And I wanted to share that with you. And next week, we're going to be talking some more about the money strategy around pricing and things like that. See you later.